I think people are under the radar. They still have guns, even though, we probably need...
This man will bait you.
I'm gonna bait? How so? What's up, guys? Nuance Bro checking in. We're here in San Francisco, California at the Women's March 2020. Let's go talk to people, see what's going on. So why are we out here today?
I'm out here to join all these other people in the Women's March and Rally to just make a showing.
Sure, and what are some things we're trying to promote or I guess fight for here?
Well, as a 60-year-old woman, I'm fighting for all the same things women in America have been fighting for since the inception of the country.
Sure, what are some of those things?
Equal rights.
Sure, like any rights in particular?
Well, I think the right to the sovereignty of my own body is maybe primary, and everything that goes with that. Equal pay.
Sure, equal pay, can we expound upon that in some way?
Well, in America, women don't get equal pay. Like, they can do the same work and get paid less than 80 cents on the dollar.
Isn't that against federal law?
It is against federal law.
So who are the companies that are breaking this law right now that we could just sue and make tons of money right now?
Well, we couldn't sue them or make tons of money because the political will isn't. The political will or the political climate is unfortunately very oppressive, and therefore the suing isn't happening at the federal level. And we also have a Supreme Court that's stacked with anti-progressives. So
sure, I mean, most of these sort of like monetary cases wouldn't even make it up to the Supreme Court anyways. I mean, it would be more in like local courts. We don't really need political will if we already passed the laws, right? So what's holding things up?
No, this is America. We always need political will. It's naive to think that we pass laws in this country and then everything shapes up.
So when you talk about like the differences in men and women's...
Unless it's anti-progressive, and then everything does shape up.
Sure. So when you talk about the difference in men and women's pay, what is that like based on? Like, is it sort of study you're basing that off of?
Oh, sociological, statistical data that's published all the time.
But isn't that just the difference between median earnings of men and median earnings of women who work full time? It's not for like the same job or in the same company, right?
No. Actually not. There are documented cases of women working in the same companies doing the same work for less pay.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, but you're not always accounting for...
Where are you living?
Sure, but you're not always accounting for things like seniority or, even
Who
the same
isn't?
out... What you said 80 cents on the dollar, that's based on median earnings for all men and women.
Is it?
Yes.
Are you telling me now?
Well, yeah,
Okay.
That's the case.
All right, then what do you want to know from me, since you
I
already
wanted to know because you brought that up. I wanted to know, like,
No,
what
you
are you...
brought it up.
Well, no, you brought it up that's what we're fighting for today. I just wanted to know what that was based on.
Okay, well, I've told you what I've told you.
What are some of like the biggest issues that you feel like under this president especially are things we have to fight back against, like maybe one or two of the top ones?
We need to fight against women in cages. We need to fight...
And women in cages meaning?
Women in cages, because this is a women's march, we need to pay attention to the women who are the most vulnerable. And I think we need to go away from dead white women syndrome, because the most likely people to get murdered are black men between 18 and 35.
And we're also focusing on women's rights, like not taking away a woman's right to choose her own health choices and taking away rights from their, controlling their own body. So, and it's happening in the background while we're distracted by all the things that are going on in the Oval Office, and in the world. So, yeah. So those are the main things, I think.
But you said women in cages specifically. I wanted to like get.
Oh, it's everyone in cages.
What do you mean exactly?
The immigrants who are being stopped at the border, who are being separated from their children, who have 35 people put in a room meant for 2 people.
Do you feel like that's intentional to like just be intentionally cruel or something?
Intentionally cruel. The fact that they despite building all these cages, don't have enough for all the people that they're sticking into it. And
But do you think that's because they're trying to be intentionally cruel, or is it because there was an unprecedented number of migrants coming over the border?
I think it's
Being
both.
cruel, yeah. And
Really?
maybe both.
Like all those border guards, like they just hate those people, even if they're of
I don't
Hispanic
think they
descent
all hate
themselves.
them. Yeah, I don't think they all hate them. I think they're following their job, like what they should be doing. It's not their fault. They're just doing what they're being told. It's not the militia of the Border Patrol. It's our government deciding to make decisions to be inhumane. So in some of the previous administrations, yes, children were separated, but the children were much older, or the children came over and they're teenagers and they came here by themselves. These are small children that shouldn't be separated from their families.
Even this notion of the cages stuff, like that happened under the Obama administration. A lot of the pictures that we have were actually from the Obama administration. So it seems like people are bringing this up a lot now when it was happening under the previous administration. Everyone was quiet about it. Why do you think that is?
Well, I know that I don't have the exact quote or the exact law, but I know that it had to do with how old the child was. So they would never separate the young children. If there was somebody older, I think there was some separation going on. But I know there's a specific law you can look up that shows what the law said in the
Some
past.
issues with like the Flores decision that kind of like tied the government's hands, or when it comes to something that gets kind of complicated. But what do you think we should do about this crisis? If you have, I mean, should we just let everybody in, just totally open borders, or what's the solution?
Improve our immigration process, and so that there'd be more available for people to come in and come into our country and be part of us. Like all of us are probably of mixed race or from a different origin or culture or ethnicity. That's what America is about. So it's about an immigration process. It's about letting people come in who need to be here, especially those who are running and seeking asylum. The world is a difficult place to live in, and we are a country that should be welcoming those people who are suffering. So it's the humane thing to do, and it's not a perfect system, but it should be better than what it is.
And I also think people forget ICE didn't exist 40 years ago. ICE is new.
Yeah, we had INS instead, but they basically performed some of the same similar functions.
Yes, but at the same time, it's gotten so much stricter. It was never this strict earlier before. It's gotten stricter, and we don't need it this strict. We don't need the fear-mongering. People who are immigrants are so much more likely to be victims of crime than convicted, and that's the problem. It's fear-mongering. It's not the truth, and at the same time, none of us are immune to propaganda, but we need to be on the lookout because these are things that we're being lied to about.
But don't you think there's issues if we had something like open borders, for example? Because there's obviously a lot of people who want to come to the United States. If we opened up our borders tomorrow, you'd probably have something like 70 million people coming overnight.
Sure.
And even Bernie Sanders, back in the day, he was actually very much against open borders. He said that was a Koch brothers policy. It's this thing that corporate America wants, and it hurts the American worker. So don't you think there's a problem when you bring in millions of people from third world countries who had wages that were maybe like less than $1 an hour in many instances, and they come here and they're maybe willing to work for triple that, which is way less than the American worker? Doesn't that hurt people here and lower our standards of living?
No, because the living wage movement in LA came from workers who were immigrants. The living wage has been most campaigned
From
for.
illegal immigrants?
Not illegal, but immigrants at the same time. And
There's a difference, obviously.
There's a difference, but America could make it easier for immigrants to come over. Immigrants don't have to be illegal if it wasn't a system that we've created that makes it so hard to come into the U.S.
Sure, but even the basic laws of supply and demand say if you have a higher supply of labor, then the demand of labor it stays the same, then the costs go down,
We need
right?
to be looking at population because our aging population is growing and our younger population isn't. So if you want to talk about economics, there's not going to be people to be putting into our capitalism if aging people are growing and people aren't having families or they're having them later. So we need to stimulate the economy by having more people and having people invest in our products, in our country, in our trade. So
But wages have also been stagnant for many decades,
have
haven't
been
they?
stagnant.
Yeah, so wouldn't that also create an upward pressure for wages if you kept the labor pool pretty tight and didn't bring additional people in? I mean, even for STEM categories, for example, only a third of people who have STEM degrees are actually in those fields,
That's from
right?
corporations, not people. Because Amazon has people, a lot of their workers are on welfare, and yet Jeff Bezos is one of the richest men in the world. it's not only a problem of people, it's a problem of corporations.
Exactly, and the corporate policy is to import millions of people so they can get more cheap labor, isn't it? So wouldn't it actually help to limit their labor supply so that they would be forced to increase wages for the American worker?
It's one opinion, it's one prospect, but I think there's more than one. So I would stay away from a myopic view of how to deal with a big problem.
They're
like
obviously
this.
multifaceted.
There's multiple layers to this, but yeah, it's a complicated issue. But I think it comes down to being mindful of being somebody in a country that honors humanity and takes care of each other, no matter if they're coming in illegally or not. We don't want people to be exposed to violence, and we are a country that is very violent. So that to me is like kind of the bottom line.
Yeah, and you mentioned what we don't talk about a lot is the violence towards black men in particular,
Yes.
and how that's extremely high. And that is a good point, because I don't hear a lot of people here, especially talking about things like that. Why do you think that is?
I think there's this thing called missing white woman syndrome. What happens is crimes against white women get so much more press coverage. When we think of all those true crime podcasts, it's so much more about people who kill women than the largest amount of homicides, which are against black men.
Yeah, and it's oftentimes at the hands of other black men as well, which is something we also don't talk about. And I mean, what do you think we can do to?
Murder rate is between black men against black men. So.
How do you think that's something we can solve in this society?
We're going to go back again. It's complicated, but I think it also goes back to poverty, and poverty breeds violence. It breeds mental health issues, and I think that's a factor of having resources where people can rise up and get an education and have opportunities, so that they're not competing or fighting or being stuck in a culture or an environment or a neighborhood where you easily slip into that type of situation or behavior or culture, whatever. So yeah, and I think there's a lot that still needs to be done in the black community, for the black community.
By the way, guys, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and notification bell for future videos. So why are we out here today?
We are here to protest social justice, sexism, civil rights, and yeah.
So I see you have a sign here. It says homeless 85%, circumcision 99%, suicide 76%, homicide 70%, and all these other things. I'm guessing you're trying to show that men have it worse than women. Is that what you're trying to show? Or?
I'm trying to bring attention to the issues that are disproportionately affecting men and males.
And why would you do that on the day of the Women's March?
Because I don't know. It's just in general, we're protesting for social justice and civil rights. And I'm not a counter protester, but this is just for
kind of a counter protest.
I'm not really trying to counter protest. I'm just trying to bring attention to the other side.
Sure. I mean, let's say there was a march for, let's say, some sort of. Let's say it's a civil rights march for blacks, right? And then someone comes up and says, oh, well, my ancestors of a different race were also oppressed during this time. Do you think like that would be viewed as a good faith sort of attempt there? Or are they coming there to maybe sort of instigate, or they're kind of minimizing the plight of other people on their day, I guess you could say?
I don't know about that. I would say that may be a little bit inappropriate.
So do you think what you're doing is inappropriate at all, or?
No.
Okay.
Because sometimes things get
I don't know why this should be only for one gender. This should be representative for both genders.
So you don't think men should have their own marches at all for their issues?
I think they should, but
so then if women came to those marches and they started talking about women's statistics, about how many of them get raped or suffer at the hands of domestic abusers and things like that,
I think that would be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Smash capitalism.
I just out here primarily to support my wife and my daughter. Hopefully encourage people to register. I'm actually here today as a Bernie volunteer. I just can't find my group.
Okay. And why do you support Bernie Sanders, and why do you think that sort of relates to what's going on out here today?
So, I mean, my number one reason for supporting Bernie Sanders is just, I mean, he's basically been on the right side of history for the past 50 years. He's supported a lot of things which at the time weren't popular that are like going more mainstream now. And
Cuban socialism or something?
I wouldn't even say
The bread lines and stuff like that.
I just
There's
think
some issues he was probably not so right on, right? Like the Sandinistas and maybe the Soviet Union.
the Sandinistas is a little bit tough. The Soviet Union was also like a difficult time, right? Like I wasn't there, right? It's Sandinistas is tough, right? I think if you look at anybody else's records, better than any other candidate that's running, for sure.
Running.
Who do you like?
Who do I like?
Yeah.
It's a hard question, man.
I mean,
it's not a lot of good
you're
choices.
educated enough to go with
Not
the
a lot of good
Sandinistas.
choices. Right now, I haven't made up my mind yet.
Well,
but,
hopefully we win you over to the Bernie camp, because at a minimum
see.
he probably won't get half the stuff done, but at least he'll try. And you don't start negotiation at the absolute minimum, which is basically where the other candidates are. If after Trump all we do is get another status quo, I think that's a loss, right? We don't have time for the status quo, and that's what the other candidates are going to deliver.
I actually just recently did a video about Bernie Sanders and Warren and their little exchange at the debate. I don't know if you saw that. What did you think about that?
About what do you mean the war and
Did you see them at the debates and how like basically they brought up that whole issue about like, oh, you said that a woman couldn't win against Trump or something?
I think anybody who knows Bernie Sanders says it's highly improbable that he said that.
You think Warren's a liar?
No, absolutely not. I love Warren.
But she said that was the case.
Are you you like a YouTuber? You trying to make like incendiary, like start some controversy? Let's put it this way: Sanders is my number one candidate. Warren is a strong number two. I'd be more than happy with Sanders.
Why did she do that though?
I think it's a he said, she said, and politics gets dirty.
Someone's got to be kind of lying though.
No, and
she kind of has a track record of lying.
People like you who try to make the world black and white. The world is not black and white.
Hey, my name's.
Somebody doesn't have to be a liar.
Yo, my name's Nuance, bro. There's no black and white
there
here.
Is no
It's all shades.
Well,
of
you're
meaning.
saying somebody has to be a liar, and I don't believe that. I think there's miscommunications that happen all the time, and I think the big problem we have is journalists like you trying to make everything black and white and divide the progressive movement is the real threat to.
She went up to Bernie and she was like, "You called me a liar." She said that. You think that's honest of her to do something like that?
I don't know, but I like Warren. She's definitely my number two, and if Bernie doesn't get it, I hope Warren does, and they both support the things that matter to America, and it's not black and white. Miscommunications happen all the time. He said, she said, even in this communication, we might be getting it wrong because I think you're trying to force divisiveness, and divisiveness doesn't help anybody. I mean,
I agree. I don't think Warren should be so divisive and try to be dishonest towards Bernie, but that's just my opinion. I'm saying that. I'm saying that.
I disagree. Don't bring that up because all it does is hurt us, man. We need some real change, and don't chop this up and only pick like.
I don't chop things up.
Okay. What's your name?
Nuance Bro. You could look it up on YouTube.
Nuance Bro.
Yeah.
Oh, you actually put bro in the name of it?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, that's awesome. All right, I'm Bill. Right. Nuance Bro, yeah. I'll be looking for you.
For sure, man. By the way, guys, please go to nuancebro.com/join. It really helps us get out here and do these types of interviews, fly out to different locations. So if you'd like to support the channel, please go to nuancebro.com/join. So why are we out here today?
I'm out here to stand with women and to make a statement that women's rights continue to be very important, that we need to come together and we need to vote, and we have to have strong representation, not only nationally but locally, that being here in this march needs to be inclusive, because there's a wide range of viewpoints, and we need to be inclusive and not shut out certain segments. And I'm happy to say that is not happening here today.
Sure, and I'm guessing by what you mean there is because you have this sign here. No, sorry, you're saying that to somebody else.
Yeah, traffic.
Yeah, sure. So you have Zioness here.
Yes.
Zionesses stand with women in Iran.
Yes.
Are you talking about people being shut out here for views similar to yours?
That has happened in the past. passed in the Women's March, but it isn't happening now. And there's been a lot of transformation in it. And the concerns, we share so many of the same concerns, that just because we happen to be pro-Israel and pro-Palestine should not mean that we should be shut out of this movement because we don't take a particular position. So as Zionists, we're saying we stand for human rights, we stand for human dignity, but it isn't exclusive of one country or another.
Sure, yeah, there used to be this history, especially with the women's right under people like Linda Sarsour and the other people like with anti-Semitism,
yes,
having relations with people like Louis Farrakhan.
That's
Are
right.
you glad that those people are gone from the Women's March?
I'm glad that people spoke up and said that isn't acceptable, because Louis Farrakhan, what he preaches is there's no other word for it but Jew hatred, and Jew hatred is not acceptable. Just as hatred of blacks, of Hispanics, of any other marginalized or any group should not be acceptable. There's really no room for hate in this movement, and anti-Semitism has been a huge problem. We see that it is on the rise across the country. So rather than hiding and being afraid, we're standing up, and we're saying it's very important to understand more on that issue, to have nuanced discussions about it, and to make a statement that we're not going to be shut out of these movements. In fact, we want to be an active participant in them.
And a lot of this Women's March kind of came up in response to Donald Trump. I mean, I believe the first one was actually on his inauguration day.
That's right.
So you say you're also pro-Israel. He seems to be one of the most pro-Israel presidents in all of U.S. history. What are your thoughts on that?
He is my main concern about Donald Trump. We address anti-Semitism on the right and the left, wherever it occurs. Donald Trump did a lot of what's the word when you're whistle when you did a lot of dog whistling in terms of anti-Semitism.
He's been the most pro-Israel president. His daughter is married to a Jewish person. He has Jewish grandchildren.
Yes.
Do you really think he's personally anti-Semitic, especially
no,
given
I don't
everything?
think he's personally anti-Semitic. I think some of his actions have been
unwittingly
problematic. Have been problematic in that regard. I think the dog whistling. I think I'm not happy with what he did with the Kurds in Turkey. Okay. I'm not happy with that. I'm not happy with certain actions, and also
northern Syria.
That's right. That's right. And in addition to that, I am. What I think there needs to be is very robust dialogue. I think the problem is the right is saying it only exists on the left, and the left is saying it only exists on the right, where we have to be honest and say it exists in our own camps and call it out where it exists. We even spoke to Elon Carr, who's the head of he's anti-Semitism czar, about this, and he works a lot across. He's Republican. He works a lot with Democrats, and he also. He really respects that we're more on the left, and we address it in our own party on the left. And we told him it also needs to happen on the right as well.
I wanted to get your specific thoughts on Trump's pro-Israel policies, because it seems like he is the most pro-Israel president in pretty much American history. What do you think about his actions specifically, like, recognizing the Golan Heights as Israel, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, approving more of the aid to Israel, like almost $4 billion annually, things like that, even basically saying have free at the West Bank to Netanyahu. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the $3.8 billion per year was actually under Obama.
Sure, but I think they changed it slightly, I think, under the Trump administration, and approved it again, obviously.
Right.
No? I thought they front...
It's scheduled exactly like it was supposed to.
Okay, I thought they front-loaded more of the funds, but I could be wrong.
That's right. And what we wanted, what recently Congress took action, because what Donald Trump was doing was shutting down aid to the security concerns that we have in the Palestinian Authority, and we're getting a lot of cooperation with the Palestinian Authority. And actually, Trump had shut down that funding, and it's been reinstated because Congress, on a bipartisan level, took it upon themselves, as well as cooperative ventures that where Palestinians and Israelis work together on beneficial projects. That has all been refunded recently. So I think we need to look at it on a case-by-case basis and not say that he's the most pro-Israel person, because
Well, who do you think is then?
I think it's been bipartisan. It's been very pro-Israel, but we have to separate we have to look at where anti-Semitism exists in each party, and we also have to look at issue upon issue.
So why are we out here today?
This is my first Women's March. I figured the best way to start the decade is to come out and support a good cause.
Sure. And what is that cause? What are we fighting for today?
Fighting for equality for women's rights and really all genders, I think. Just coming together and seeing a group of people that just believe so much in a cause like this, it's really empowering.
Sure. And what are some of those rights where you feel like women aren't equal?
I feel like there's a lot of inequality in terms of like gender pay, in terms of like in politics. We have so many legislations and so many laws that I feel like we could really step up and have more representation in different aspects.
Sure. Like what kind of laws?
Well, for me, I'm not really too much into the political aspect, I gotta be honest. I do appreciate, because I am into film, so I tend to love a lot of like women's rights in terms of those, trying to see getting more women directors, women producers. That's really my niche area.
Sure. Well, the one issue you did mention was like pay gap or difference in pay. Like what do you mean by that?
There's just so many women that tend to get like they don't get offered promotions because, there's always a man that seems to be more qualified when it might not be the case. And even like, transgender men, transgender women, like there's so many other genders as well that I feel like could be really important to really promote.
Sure. And are there any like statistical analyses or studies that you're looking at to base this off of, or is this just like a feeling? Or?
Oh, not specific. I read a ton of stuff online. I don't save anything specifically, but I read it.
Because like so far the statistics seem to show that at least up until the age of 40, the pay gap or the wage gap or the earnings gap between men and women is effectively zero. Mm-hmm. And then when you control for other factors, it pretty much evaporates into nothing. Most of the pay gap isn't really anything for like the same job. It's just median earnings of men and women who work full time, right?
Yeah, sure.
So you don't actually like believe in like they're discriminating against women specifically at a certain job, saying like, hey, you have a vagina, therefore we're going to pay you 20 cents less than a man?
No, not on purpose. I think we're in a better place where there's a lot of people that are kind of realizing their mistakes. There's just a few little things here and there that I feel like we could really improve on. And even though they're not as big and as important as before, there's definitely some importance that we need to step it up.
Obviously, in the battle of the sexes, who do you think has it worse, men or women, as far as, just like, I guess, social ills towards them?
It really depends on one's perspective. I don't think I'm one to speak on that.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you'd like to say?
Go vote, you guys. Really important.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you. So why are we out here today?
Because I feel strongly that our democracy is really at a point where we don't know if we'll continue to have a democracy if things don't change in this country politically.
Sure. How so?
Well, to start with, we need to get a different president, someone who would be here to protect women's rights and cares about people of color and women's rights. The other part is getting rid of some of the people in the Senate now who are really stopping any kind of progression that we made.
I know you're saying like that's how we would fix it, but when I said how so, I meant like, how are they making like our democracy disappear?
Oh. Yeah. Well, by overturning any kind of regulations we've had on, the climate and the environment, by trying to take away women's rights to choose, by being racist, trying to change immigration to the point where people aren't allowed back in our country, where we've never been a country that have thrown people out. And just in every respect.
Wait, we've never been a country to throw people out?
Well,
you
that's
sure?
True. Well, you're right. But
we literally turn boats around to people.
Right. No. And you're absolutely right. But not on this level, not such blatant racism that.
Is there something you're speaking about specifically? Or?
Well, I'm speaking about the rhetoric, the wall, the not allowing, making people stop in Central America, not letting them in the country anymore.
That's illegal immigration. That's like been the policy of the United States to stop that, right?
Well, yes and no, and I agree, but not to let people try to get asylum in this country is not the policy that has been. I mean, we have always allowed people to at least try and get into this country if they have a reason for asylum. I'm not saying you let everybody in this country. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you give them a fair chance. And I think, I'm a second generation American, and if my grandparents weren't allowed to come over here, I wouldn't be here. So I feel like this country is made by immigrants and that we have to respect that and find ways to legally let people in this country.
And I see you have this sign. It seems like it's more of a intersectional nature where you're talking about love is love, Black Lives Matter, climate change, immigrants, and women's rights or human rights. Let's talk about some of these points, like love is love. Like, how does that tie into this event?
Well, I think that we're in a time where there's a lot of hateful talk from this president and from people that support him.
About like what specific? Like you're talking about with respect to gay marriage, or?
I would say respect to, you name it. I mean, basically, we have a president that, has said disparaging things about women, has been accused of, raping women, in my eyes.
But with respect to love is love specifically,
well,
like
I think love is love is it's changing the tone of what we've been seeing for the last 3 years in America. I've never seen a time in my lifetime where there's been this platform for white supremacists to feel like they're, okay with what they're doing, and they're feeling that they're being condoned by the person running this country. And even if other presidents have been racist in the past or had their issues, I've never seen anything this blatant. And
is there a specific example of that you're referring to?
Yeah, you could go back to like Charlottesville, and there's some very good people here.
Well, in that same speech that he said I'm not talking about the white supremacists and the neo-Nazis.
So are you asking me, do I think that Trump is pro-white supremacists?
Well, because he specifically condemned those people, didn't he?
He did not. Well, he did not. He said many of these people are good people, and it was a.
Well, he said good people on both sides, but he also said, "I'm not speaking about the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists."
Oh, well, I didn't hear him say that. Maybe you heard him say that. I didn't.
Sure. And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally.
I do believe his policies and his things he has said make me question whether he really is against white supremacy, because he is, there's no doubt in my mind that this man is a racist and that everything he stands for is racist. And it's not just since he's been president. I mean, he's the one who wanted Obama's birth certificate. I mean, his whole rhetoric is very racist to me, and that's how I see him. I don't see him as, somebody who cares about people of color or people that are struggling in this country. That's the other thing.
Tying that to Black Lives Matter, because, we can kind of tie these two together. He did pass the First Step Act. That's something that he actually fought for and passed. That was something a lot of, you could say, white nationalists, white supremacists weren't really happy about. How does that kind of comport with this idea that he is a white nationalist or white supremacist himself, or at least supports them, because that kind of went totally against that idea?
So he's very contradictory. I'm not going to say he goes back and forth. His policies, from one day to the other, you don't know what he's going to say. My feeling is he's done a lot of damage to the country. And if you don't want to, if we're not focusing on immigration, to me, the laws, the regulations that he has ended that we're trying to save or help the environment, to me, it's inexcusable. I mean,
is there a specific one in particular?
Well, it's just stopping any kind of regulation that we had been putting in place for the last 8 years.
Like, what's an example of a specific one that you feel like has harmed you?
No, that's a good point, and I think it's probably more based on putting somebody who is anti-environment in the head of being the head of the EPA.
But no regulation in particular that you can name at the moment?
I think there's been a lot, and maybe I'm not going to be able to spew off which regulation, but there is definitely a trend in this presidency to deny climate change. That in itself, to me, is unbelievable. Deny science, and basically not try to deregulate things that need to be regulated. And so you're right, I don't have a specific example, but that is the trend and that is the way this administration has carried out their lack of science and lack of common sense as far as I'm concerned. And so without being specific, there are definitely lots of regulations, and I read about it all the time. Okay, now he's stopping this regulation, he's stopping that, he's turning over this that Obama did. I feel like he's in a presidency only to undo everything that Obama did for 8 years. I think that's his whole goal. So,
how do you think that's working out economically with like the lowest unemployment rate and the economy it's highest down?
I agree with you. First of all,
well, you agree or disagree?
No, I agree that the stock market's doing really well and there's low unemployment. What I don't agree with,
increase in wages as well.
I think it's very minimal from where we. No, there is not. Maybe for.
I can cite some numbers if you would like.
No, you can cite numbers, but are you saying to me that you think that the middle class and the poor are better off than they were 8 years ago?
Absolutely, yeah. 8 years ago, especially.
No, well, I don't agree with you. I think that
we were just coming out of recession like 8 years ago, right?
Well, no, that was 12 years ago.
I know, but I was saying we were like coming out of that.
Okay, so you're right in that respect, but I think Obama left him with a strong economy, so I don't agree that this is because of Trump. I think he inherited a good economy where Obama inherited a horrendous economy, and I think he's trying to take all the credit for this, which I think is ridiculous.
So why are we out here today?
We are out here as women because we're, feel so strongly about getting Trump out of the White House, and we have so many issues that we're fighting for in our lives at this point. It's, as you can see, my sign is from an old demonstration probably a year and a half ago around gun control. But
is that the March for Our Lives one?
It was a different march after a bunch of gun violence, and I just felt like it's still relevant. I feel like I'm fighting for all the things that I fought my whole life for. Democracy is unraveling before my eyes, so I feel like I should be out on the street every day at this point.
And for gun control in particular, why do you feel like that's such an important issue for you, and why do you feel like it would achieve the ends that you're trying to achieve?
I think it's just one issue, and it's relevant because I have grandchildren. I worry about the schools. I feel like we don't have enough mental health services. Most of the people that have been doing the gun violence in the schools and are young people who are, alienated, disenfranchised, and don't feel a sense of self-worth. And I feel like our mental health system in the middle schools and the elementary schools and high schools, it's all related in my mind, caring about humans. So.
Sure. I assume you live here in California. Are you in the Bay Area?
I live in the Castro.
Okay.
I live here in San Francisco.
So you're in San Francisco in particular. So we have some of the strictest gun laws in the entire nation. Do you feel why are you advocating? I guess is it for other people
This is for the world. This is for the country. This is for my support as a grandmother. As somebody who cares about kids and what the message they're getting about violence. I look at what my grandson is doing on the iPad, and there's violent, some of the, kid games are teaching, in my mind, are helping kids be sort of blasé about violence, desensitizing kids to violence. So I'm worried about that. I'm worried, I feel like kids are using so much social media that they're losing their connection to other humans.
Absolutely.
And so for me, everything's connected. I just grabbed this. I made another sign that says, vote, avoid unwanted presidency.
So kind of like pregnancy.
But somebody I was with took that sign because they're not a lesbian grandma. So so I ended up with my lesbian. This is my backdrop. This is when in doubt, I don't have another sign, I take this with me because it's still relevant no matter where I go.
You have your stash of signs.
I definitely have my stash of signs, and today I gave my other ones away. So that's why, yeah.
So going back to the gun control thing, because you do live in California, yet we still have a lot of gun violence here in California, especially in places like Richmond, Oakland, and certain other areas. Why do you feel like despite all this gun control, we still have all this gun violence? compared to places who might have like no gun control laws, like New Hampshire,
People
Idaho.
still have guns. You know what? In a nutshell, racism. I think we have a lot of racism, so that the cops. I mean, we're talking about not just gun violence out on the street, but also the police going after people.
That's a low proportion of the homicides is police on other people. I mean,
Yes.
mostly it's like people like black on black crime.
black. Yeah,
so
yeah.
why do you feel like that's going on despite all the gun control?
I think people are under the radar. They still have guns, even though, you know, we probably need.
This man will bait you.
I'm gonna bait? How so?
All right, I'm going to stop because I'm losing my people. But
no worries. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, guys, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Social media links are in the description box below, as well as merch. Support us at nuancebro.com/join, and I'll see you next time, bro.